Last year, I can't tell you how many plants I broke dragging a rubber hose through the garden. It was just a disaster. I was attacking my own plants with the hose. It was just very hard to maneuver with it. Hello, my name is Crystal and welcome to our channel. I am going to be talking about how we water our garden. The short answer of how we water our garden is with soaker hoses. And we do that because it is a simple, easy way to water our garden and it's super affordable. We really would like to use drip irrigation. We just haven't gotten there yet. And while we have read and seen videos on how easy drip irrigation is, soaker hoses were just easier last year and we already had so many of those materials that we decided to use them again this year, except make it better. Last year our garden was about half the size it is now. We have added about 7 new gardening beds to our garden this year, and we had to come up with a way that would be easy for me to water the garden and doesn't cost very much, because we did have to buy some more materials this year and I didn't really want to spend the extra money on a whole new irrigation system. Last year we bought those soaker hose kits from Home Depot and it worked out really good. We just kind of did it wrong. We didn't really set it up efficiently because we didn't understand the concept of the soaker hoses and how they work. So this year we tried to make sure that we set it up better. Even though our garden is twice as big as it was last year, we actually have a better watering system than we did because we were able to figure out how to create smaller zones. So bigger garden, smaller watering zones. What I mean by zones is when you get a soaker hose kit, it's just a long hose that you cut to fit wherever you want the water to go. And last year, we didn't have a lot of hose attachments and we couldn't really spend the money on getting extra hose attachments because 1, I wasn't looking in the right places, and 2, the idea we had in our mind for it was way more complicated than it needed to be. The zones were way bigger. Pretty much we would use an entire soaker hose in a whole area leading from bed to bed, and when you would turn the hose on, the water just wouldn't get to the end of the soaker hose. I mean, we weren't evenly watering our garden beds or containers the way that we should have been. What ended up happening because of that, I would have to go in with another hose and actually hand water everything, and it just kind of made it pointless to have the soaker hoses. At the end of the season last year, I took out everything and pretty much did a reset for this year. I took out all the soaker hoses, wrapped them up, coiled them up, took all the parts and everything and put them in a big tote in our basement, ready to use for this year. So this kind of leads into, where do we get our supplies for watering our garden? This year I was way more adventurous for where I was searching for things. Now last year we bought the actual soaker hose kit from Home Depot. It has the hose and all of the little attachments that go onto the ends of the hose to connect them and put caps on them and make it so that you can attach the hose to them, all the little parts. And then over the winter time, Steve was in Walmart and he was in the gardening section looking for fertilizers and things for us to slowly stock up on for summertime. And he also found clearance soaker hoses. And they were the same brand and they were 1/3 of the cost of what they are during the summertime. So he bought 2 50-foot soaker hoses. Now those hoses didn't come with any of the attachments or anything, but we had the ones left over from the kits last year. We were hoping that we would be able to just use all that stuff along with the additional soaker hoses. So for keeping the soaker hoses in place, I use the landscape staples. I get the 6-inch ones off Amazon that do not rust. So the non-rusting 6-inch landscape staples are the ones that I use to keep the soaker hoses in place. And they're relatively inexpensive. You can get a huge box of like 200 of them. Now there's 2 new places I tried this year. The first place was Harbor Freight. Steve was so excited to be in there. There were so many things to look at, but I immediately went to the hose and their small garden section and I found all the things. We had recently bought a 4-way splitter at Home Depot for about $20. At Harbor Freight it was half the price. So I got 2 of those. They only had 1 2-way splitter, so I got that there. And then the other place that I went to was Dollar General. I saw that they had hoses that were really affordable. They had the male and female mending parts, and they had the on and off for the hoses, and then they also had the 2-way splitter, and those were $1 a piece. and they have that coupon when you go on Saturdays and it's $5 off 25. So I got two 50-foot hoses and just a bunch of the little connectors and attachments, and I paid $20 for it. It was just such a great deal with how much money we have spent. We really try and save money everywhere, and while these may not be the best quality, they work. They work for now, and my suggestion is to buy the horrible looking neon colors because they're bright. They had dark hoses there, and I just felt like the sun would be on those so much that the hose might actually not last as long. So I may be completely wrong in my logic, but I just felt like getting the neon colors would help the hose last longer. Being a super frugal person, I have a tendency to spend money on things that I won't have to replace. I am willing to spend more on an item that will last a very long time versus buying a cheap one that I'm gonna have to replace year after year. But in this particular situation, the hoses that I was gonna be using, one was just gonna be getting cut up and made into smaller hoses, and the other one isn't going to be used a lot. It just makes it closer to the house so that I can attach another hose to it and get water to that section. So I waited until everything was in the ground and before I actually started to lay out the soaker hose. So the first thing I did was I brought up that tote with all those parts and pieces from last year, and I grabbed the two new soaker hoses and I laid it out and stretched things out and had it all on the side of the garden so that I could figure out what needs to go where. I put the soaker hose in between all of the rows so that each portion of the soaker hose was right next to each of the plants so that every single plant had access to the water. And I secured the soaker hose in place using those 6-inch non-rusting landscape staples. And that is all I did with it. I just laid it in place. I didn't worry about the connectors, I didn't worry about the end caps, nothing. I just laid it out. I did this in every single one of the beds, and I actually waited until the sun was down, so I would do this after dinner or first thing in the morning before it got really hot, because it's kind of a tedious project and it just weighs on you a lot. So I waited until it was the cooler time before I did this. I just made sure I made some sort of progress, even if it was a little bit at a time. Once all of the garden beds and some of the container sections had all the soaker hoses laid out, I then tried to figure out attachments. I had to think about where I wanted the hose to go in the garden, how many hoses I would need in between the beds. This is different than we did last year. This goes back to talking about the zones. Every single bed is its own zone this year. Last year our zones were much larger, and it was just like the back side of the garden and the front side of the garden with one Y splitter, and I would just turn it on. Depending on where I wanted the water to go, I would just turn on and off that Y splitter either way, but those sections were way too big. So this year we made the sections way smaller, contained to each bed. And so I needed to figure out how many hoses, how long they needed to be, and make sure that I had enough Y splitters. Those 4-way splitters are great. Like I said, we found them at Harbor Freight for an awesome price. They do sell them at Home Depot, but it was about $20. We only got one of those, and it really makes it easy for me to turn the hose on and then select where I want the water to go. So if I just want to do one of the tomato beds, I can just have the water go to that one tomato bed. I don't have to have it on full blast. I just have it on a low pressure so that I can leave it on for a little while and the tomatoes can get all of that water. So I needed to figure out the length of the hoses and how many we needed, and I also needed to figure out the direction that I wanted the soaker hose to flow. So where I wanted to put the caps. So they come with the connectors where you can attach the hose, or it comes with the end cap that stops the flow of the water in the soaker hose. So it would be the end of the hose. So I needed to figure out where that would be, and it was much easier to do with the soaker hoses already laid out in place for me to figure it out and picture it what way we wanted it to go. I had Steve cut up one of the 50-foot hoses from Dollar General, and he used the little mending parts that I was able to find there. So I had bought 2 male ends and 2 female ends. He was able to make 3 separate hoses from the 50-foot hose to give us what we need, and then I just attach everything together. So for most of the garden beds, I have a 2-way splitter at the start of it so that I can continue on with the hose length going all the way down, and I can just turn it on at the bed that I want the water to go to. And it makes it really easy to water our garden that way. Now I can talk about exactly how it's set up in our garden. I have 2 big zones. So I have the chicken coop end, and then I have the other side. We'll call that the travel trailer side. I have a 4-way splitter at each end, and each one is attached to a hose that goes to a spigot on our property. So here is the 4-way splitter. We have the AquaJoe hose going to the chicken coop and watering the outside garden, like our strawberry bed and our flower garden and all the stuff on the outside of our vegetable garden. We have this hose going to another 4-way splitter inside the garden, which then has either soaker hoses directly connected to it going to each of the beds and draped through some of the containers to use up all the water we can. And then I have one of the 30-foot sections we made going that way, and another one coming this way. And this is how I have it set up for this row of containers. Just have it wrapped around the plants. I have one of those Dollar General splitters here, and I have room to add another hose if I want to get to those tomato plants up there. And this one, I have another Y connection to add a splitter here to go to each of the allium beds if I wanted to do that, as well as I have a soaker hose set up on these Roma tomatoes as well. This hose is our main hose going all the way down the center of the garden, connecting to all the other soaker hoses. So I have the main hose here. This is the end of it, and it splits off. One goes to this zucchini bed here, and another goes into the cucumber bed. Goes all the way around to each of the plants, and I can turn each of these on depending on which section I want watered. And it attaches to this Y here, and this one goes to the watermelon and the winter squash and our ground cherries. And that's the main one. And this one is our other AquaJoe that we use as just a regular hose in the garden so that I can water things, or if I'm planting stuff, I can water it in good. And you need a hose inside the garden. The travel trailer side, we have, this is the hose that we got from Dollar General. It is nothing fancy, but it does the job. And I have it going all the way around and underneath the fence, and that leads to a 4-way splitter inside the garden, and that goes to about 4 different beds over there. My bell pepper bed, the 2 tomato beds, 3 tomato beds this year. I don't even know what I have anymore. So 3 of the tomato beds. And one of the hoses, one of the small liter hoses that we made last year for our soaker hose setup, goes to the soaker hose, and we have it weaved in between all of the plants where we need the water to go. So this is one of the connector pieces. It's the ones that attach to the hose, and then it has a little pressure thing that goes inside of it to pressurize the water. And then this is the end cap here to stop it. And then this is just an extra piece that we needed to connect the 2 hoses because we reused materials from last year. And this is one of the non-rusting 6-inch landscape staples that I use, and it just holds the hose in place. And then when I want water to go to the garden, I just turn it on here and the water will go through all the way around where it needs to go. And because we keep the zones very small, I'm able to evenly water all the plants in each garden. The peas, once those come out, I have set it up so that I can add another 2-way splitter in there to set up the remainder parts of the soaker hose that I have to cover that bed. I had started those pea seeds way back when, and I didn't even think about watering at that time. So they're doing just fine with some hand watering once in a while, but most of the time they haven't even needed it. We've had steady rain so far this year, and so they've been doing really good without it. Logistically speaking, it's difficult for me to get the soaker hoses to all the containers that I have. I do have it set up for some of them. It's just with another 2-way splitter from a small hose, and I have it going to each of the containers in a row, and then I have it going off to another row of containers, and that seems to work out pretty good. My suggestion to you, if this sounds overwhelming, if it sounds like a larger project than you want to handle, it's not. It's really not. It is very simple. I feel like using the soaker hoses is an awesome introduction into watering systems for your garden, and for us it has been a huge learning experience, and I'm glad we are doing it this way before we get into any kind of drip irrigation. I'm constantly changing things and wanting to try new things and doing different things in the garden, and the soaker hoses gives me a little bit of freedom to do that, maneuverability, and I know drip irrigation does too, and I do look forward to using a drip irrigation system at some point in the future and setting all that up and learning how to do that. For now, the soaker hose setup has worked out really good. It's been super affordable, really easy for us to set up, and if we make a mistake, the one problem that we have is sometimes the soaker hose gets a hole in it and it just starts shooting water. But other than that, it's really not that big of a deal. They're affordable and it's easy to set up. If the soaker hose thing is something that you want to do, look at the layout of your garden, draw it on a piece of paper, look how you want to do it. All we do is weave the soaker hose so that each plant has access to the water that's going to be coming out of it, and it has worked out really good. Kind of on the same wavelength as watering and irrigation in your garden. We just make sure that our containers and our garden beds are mulched really well. That makes a huge difference when you're looking at the containers drying out. You know, some of these plants I wasn't able to mulch right away and the soil would dry out so quickly. As soon as I mulched it, they were doing way better and the water wasn't evaporating out of the soil as fast, and it's really important to use mulch in the garden. So we would say that if you are thinking about setting up soaker hoses in your garden, just make sure you keep the zones small, keep it simple. Think about how your garden is set up and where you need the water to go, and then once you have that, then the next step would be to buy the soaker hose and lay that out. And then you can figure out how much hoses you need. You know, they sell the liter hoses, but they can be kind of expensive for how much you're getting. But you can get the liter hoses if you don't want to cut up a hose and make your own little sections that you're gonna need. So you can buy all the materials that you need at Home Depot or Lowe's. I know Ocean State Job Lot and Big Lots, they sell hoses and attachments, the ends for the hoses. So you know, it is really easy to do, and I have to say, once you have it done, it is like really nice, because now I can just turn on one of the spigots and then turn on that section and it's all right there ready to go, and I don't have to stand there with a hose. Plus it's better for the plants if you're not just spraying water at them. You know, last year I can't tell you how many plants I broke dragging a rubber hose through the garden. It was just a disaster. I was attacking my own plants with the hose because it's just very hard to maneuver with it. If you're looking for a hose to have in the garden, I do have to say those fabric hoses. We got the Aqua Joe, the 50-foot for $20 at Home Depot, and it is the best garden hose I have ever had so far. I'm able to get in so many places in my garden. It doesn't like flip up when you're dragging it because the fabric, it kind of bends to where you want it to go. So when I'm dragging the hose through the garden, I don't have to worry about it like flipping up and knocking a zucchini plant over, or flipping up and knocking over a container. It just stays with you. So I really hope to use this platform to be able to share information and make things easier for each other, how I can improve in the garden and all the things that we do. So let me know in the comments below what you think about soaker hoses, your experience with them, or what kind of watering system you use, what you like or don't like about it. It's really a learning experience, and everything that we have done, all the progress that we have made, everything has come with a learning curve, and even the soaker hoses. It wasn't something we had ever used before. Last year, we definitely did it wrong. So this year, we so far, it seems like we've done it a lot better, and there's less leaks and more water getting to the plants that need it. But hey, that'll do it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.